After the Las Vegas story, Vincent's next film was one of the most influential of his entire career, House of Wax. Professor Henry Jarrod, played by Vincent Price, is co-owner and proprietor of a wax museum specializing in historical scenes such as Marie Antoinette, Joan of Arc, and John Wilkes Booth. Business is just so-so, and despite a pending offer to buy the collection, Jarrod's business partner, Matthew Burke, played by Roy Roberts, has another solution: burn the place and collect the insurance.
You ever thought of what would happen if we had a fire here?
As the sole sculptor of the figures on display, Jarrod considers his creations his children and vehemently objects. Burke lights fire to one of the figures and the two men get into a fist fight while the place goes up in flames. Burke escapes while the building collapses around Jarrod. Afterwards, Burke collects the insurance money and begins living it up, dating a can-can dancer named Kathy Gray, played by Carolyn Jones. Late one evening, Burke is attacked in his office and killed by a mysterious, cloaked stranger with a disfigured face. He ties a rope around Burke's neck and tosses him down an elevator shaft, making it look like suicide. Shortly after this, Kathy also turns up dead, her body discovered by her roommate Sue Allen, played by Phyllis Kirk. The same mysterious stranger is in the room when she discovers the body and chases her out the window and through the fog-shrouded streets. She escapes to the home of her old friend Scott Andrews, played by actor Paul Picerni.
What happened, Sue? What is it?
Kathy's body is taken to the local morgue where it is stolen by none other than our good old friend, the disfigured stranger. He lowers the body with a rope to a cart manned by accomplices in a back alley. Meanwhile, Professor Jarrod has resurfaced and is now the owner of a brand new wax museum. This time around, he is focusing on gruesome acts of violence rather than the tame historical dioramas of the previous museum.
And here it is, the bloody guillotine.
He was severely injured in the fire, now confined to a wheelchair, his hands badly burned and unusable. However, he has enlisted the aid of a mute assistant named Igor, played by Charles Bronson, who does the sculpting on the figures for him. Sue and Scott attend the premiere of the museum, and Sue is stunned by the likeness between the statue of Joan of Arc and her former roommate, Kathy. Jarrod explains to her that Kathy was the inspiration for his piece, her photo in the paper his reference. Something still doesn't seem right, and Sue goes to the police with her suspicions. Dissatisfied with the police response, Sue enters the museum after hours one evening to get a look for herself. In a scene heavily influenced by the Phantom of the Opera, Jarrod surprises Sue, stepping out of his wheelchair and walking towards her. She lashes out in fear, her fist striking his face with startling results. Sue learns firsthand the terrible secret of the Wax Museum, the disappearing corpses, and the O2 lifelike figures. Professor Jarrod now has plans to include Sue in his collection permanently. House of Wax is a remake of the 1933 film Mystery of the Wax Museum. Both films were made by Warner Brothers Pictures and both based on a play called The Waxworks, written by Charles Belden. House of Wax was a highly successful film due in large part to being released in the exciting new process of 3D. House of Wax was not the first 3D movie, however. That honor went to the film Bwana Devil a year prior from writer, producer, director Arch Oboler, best remembered for the Lights Out old-time radio series. But it was the first 3D horror movie and the first 3D color movie from a major studio. In addition, House of Wax was also the first widely distributed film using the new process of stereophonic sound. Today, House of Wax is recognized as one of the finest examples of the 3D process, with several scenes shot specifically for 3D effect, including the famous scene outside the theater with the paddleball man who breaks the fourth wall and addresses the audience directly.
Well, there's someone with a bag of popcorn. Close your mouth, it's the bag I'm aiming at, not your tonsils. Here she comes.
House of Wax was directed by Andre de Toth, who was a bit of an odd choice for director of a 3D movie, as he was blind in one eye and therefore unable to see the final results of the 3D process. House of Wax had two premieres, one for each coast. The East Coast premiere was held in New York, April 10th, 1953, and the West Coast premiere was held in Los Angeles, California a week later on April 16th, and kicked off with a midnight spook show. Bela Lugosi appeared at the LA premiere in a cape and tuxedo with a gorilla on a leash, It was the only time Bella and Vincent would meet. House of Wax was re-released in theaters in 1971 in 3D and again in 1982, again in 3D, which was where I first got to see the film. In the movie, Dr. Jarrod's mute assistant Igor is played by a young Charles Bronson, credited as Charles Buczynski. Price and Bronson would again meet in the 1961 film Master of the World, but this time Bronson would play the lead and Price, of course, the villain. Actress Carolyn Jones, who played dancer Kathy Gray in this film, would go on, of course, to wider fame as Morticia Addams in The Addams Family. Vincent Price almost turned down the role of Professor Jarrod as he was offered the lead in a Broadway play, My Three Angels, at the same time. He said it was a decision that changed his life. House of Wax is a rare example of a remake that is better than the original. It holds up well with time, whether viewed 3D or flat. This was Vincent's only film in theaters in 1953, though he did appear on several dramatic roles for television. The importance of House of Wax on Price's career can't be overstated. This was Vincent's first true horror role. He would go on to make many more horror movies over his career, 6 more in the 1950s alone. This film laid the foundation for Price as horror movie icon. Roger Corman would come along in the 1960s and cement that status. Next up, Price will be reunited with actor Victor Mature in the 1954 film noir Dangerous Mission.
I'm going to give the people what they want. Sensation, horror, shock. Send them out in the streets to tell their friends how wonderful it is to be scared to death.
Tried to bite a Chips Ahoy cookie without biting a chip. I'll reconstruct the crime. Snack time. Someone spies a playful of Chips Ahoy cookies. He bites a chip. He tries again, but the chips are stacked against him.
Original, chewy, and striped Chips Ahoy.
I confess, I did it, and I'll do it again.
Did you bite a chip?